I'm 28 years old, and my name is Iris Sutton. I will always remember the day my family attempted to take everything away from me, not understanding that I had already guaranteed my future. I had been the one in charge for the majority of my life. I was the daughter who put in a lot of effort, made sacrifices, and did everything correctly. Isla, my 25-year-old younger sister, lived like a real Instagram star in the meantime. She was uploading photos from Greece, showing off her costly handbags, and going out to upscale clubs while I was at the office, managing the family business and 3 of our most successful hotels. Every time I expressed my frustration, my mother, Margaret Sutton, would respond, "She's young, let her enjoy life, she'll mature eventually." However, she never did. She was the favorite despite being 25 years old, still living at home, and having no employment outside of social media. Robert Sutton, our father, had started from nothing and established an empire of boutique hotels. And since I was 16, I, his devoted, overworked daughter and firstborn, had been learning the ropes. My father used to remark, "Iris, you have to understand, this business requires sacrifices. If I had to postpone plans with friends in order to stay up late going over contracts, sacrifices." Ironically, I was the only one who made them, and my world changed forever the day I realized how much that meant to my family. The secret of $2 million. It all changed 6 months ago. I met Liam, our new financial advisor. He was astute, truthful, and, in contrast to the majority of my father's acquaintances, really concerned about morality. Liam entered my office one afternoon, closed the door, and set a folder on my desk. "Iris," he began in a serious voice, "I've been reviewing the accounts from the past 5 years. Did you know your sister has spent over $2 million of company funds?" I went cold. "What?" He slid the papers in my direction. "Travel costs, designer clothing, extravagant gatherings, and luxury vehicles are all significant expenses." "She classified everything under marketing expenses," Liam clarified. "She claims she's the brand's social media image." I was ill. I confronted my father that evening. His answer? Relaxing. "I know, Iris. I approved those expenses." Stunned, I gazed at him. $2 million? Are you serious? Are you serious? With a sigh that suggested he was sick of me, he removed his glasses. "You contribute to the company in your way, and she contributes in hers." He and I had worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week, to develop this business, and my sister's contribution was to throw parties and buy handbags. I became aware of the reality at that point. They would never be satisfied with me. Even after giving up everything, it wasn't enough. Liam told me something at that point that completely altered my life, the power I was unaware I possessed. A couple of weeks later, Liam informed me, "Iris, you need to protect yourself. Your family is treating the company like their personal piggy bank." However, it wasn't even the worst. Liam discovered another thing. "Your father is trying to transfer your house to Isla." My heart stopped beating. "My house? The one I bought with my own money?" He paused. "Technically, you bought it with your salary from the company. They're arguing that it was a corporate gift and can be reassigned." I was physically sick. The one refuge I had created for me, the house I had worked so hard to acquire, and my haven from my toxic family. With just one signature, they were going to take it away from me. Liam wasn't only here to deliver bad news, though. He had discovered something my father never thought I would discover. The majority stockholder was me. My father set up ownership in that manner for tax considerations years ago, never realizing that I would know how to exercise that authority. "You don't just work here, Iris," Liam stated to me. "You own this company. It's time you start acting like it." Thus, we devised a strategy. And when the time came, I was ready. The gathering that revolutionized everything. My parents hosted an extravagant celebration at our estate on the evening of my 28th birthday. Everyone was present, including family members, board members, and business partners. An ideal setting for their imagined humiliation of me. At the height of the celebration, Isla got up and held a crystal champagne glass most likely worth $500. With her flawless smile gleaming at the audience, she declared, "I have a special announcement. My father has given me the most amazing gift, Iris's house." There was silence in the room. The applause followed. My mum grinned proudly. My dad averted his eyes from me. "Is Isla too?" She appeared victorious. "Isn't it wonderful?" she said. "Since Iris is always at the office, she doesn't really need such a big house. I'll put it to better use." Slowly, I got to my feet. My heart was pounding, but I had a clear head. "You're right, Esla," I answered in a steady, quiet voice. "I am too busy at the office." I took a folder out of my handbag and placed it on the table. "And since we're making announcements, I have one of my own." There was silence in the room. Everyone was watching me, unaware that her entire world was about to fall apart. Isla continued to smile. I opened the folder. As CEO and majority shareholder of our boutique hotel company, I have a few important updates. The change was immediate. Isla's grin wavered. In his chair, my father straightened. First, effective immediately, all personal expenses will require board approval. No more personal credit cards disguised as marketing expenses. There was a murmur among the people. Second, I have initiated a full audit of the company's financial records for the past 5 years. That includes all marketing expenditures, including those related to social media. My dad's mouth clenched. "This isn't the time or place," he remarked in a strained voice. "Iris." I grinned. "Isn't it? Didn't you just use my birthday to announce that you were taking my house? Seems only fair that I get to share my own little surprise." Liam got up from the other side of the room and started distributing files to the board members. Within those folders, the proof of appropriation has been provided. Corporate fraud totaling more than $2 million. The room exploded. And I was certain of one thing as I gazed at my mother's barely disguised anger, my father's clenched jaw, and Isla's pale face. This was just the start. The room went electric as soon as I was done talking. A few gazed at me in disbelief. Others looked at each other uneasily. Then there was Isla, whose meticulously manicured, Instagram-perfect smile instantly fell apart. "My dad?" Someone had apparently struck him in the stomach. "Iris," he began in a strained voice. "We can talk about this privately." I shook my head and laughed a little. "Now you want privacy? After you just announced to a room full of people that you were stealing my house?" There were a few murmurs among the people. A few of the board members, with whom I had collaborated for years, were already paging over the papers. Liam had distributed, their expressions growing serious as they examined the figures. The facts were out, and I had only just begun. "The fear arrives," Isla yelled. "This is ridiculous," and got to her feet so quickly that her chair brushed the floor. Her voice was suddenly rough and tremulous, lacking the lovely, polished tone she used on camera. "Dad approved all of those expenses. I'm the face of the brand." I raised an eyebrow as I turned to face her. "The brand? You mean the boutique hotel chain? The one designed for business travelers and families?" On the presentation screen in the room, I pressed a button. The screen behind me was covered with a slideshow of Isla's Instagram photos. Ibiza clubbing. The city of Milan is known for its extravagant shopping excursions, influencer parties on a drunken yacht. "So let's take a look at this branding strategy of yours," I replied while crossing my arms. "Tell me, Isla, how exactly does this help promote a luxury hotel business?" She went pallid. The throng began to grumble once more, louder this time. Some of the investors appeared utterly indignant. After that, Margaret, my mother, decided she had had enough. Her cheeks flushed with anger, and she leaped from her seat. "Iris, how dare you humiliate your sister like this?" I didn't flinch when she glared at me. "You mean the way you tried to humiliate me by taking my house on my own birthday?" My father then intervened, attempting to regain control with an authoritative tone. "This is a family matter," he continued, holding on to the table's edge as if he could still control the situation. "I ask all non-family members to leave." Liam interrupted me from the other side of the room before I could reply. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Everybody looked at him. As he spoke to the audience, he fixed his tie and appeared totally unfazed. Since this involves potential corporate fraud, the board members have both the right and the obligation to be present for this discussion. The room's tension changed. This was no longer only a family dispute. This was a crisis in business. The golden child's collapse. Isla was quiet now, totally silent. Her flawless, rich girl poise was evaporating as she stood there with her hands clenched. She had one final card to play, though. She spat, her voice trembling. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me." I eventually burst out laughing at that point. I repeated, shaking my head. "Jealous? Of what? Are you saying that you've never worked a single day in your life? That you blew through millions while I was running this company?" Anger twisted her face. Liam sprang between me as she pushed forward, his voice calm and low but deadly serious. "Careful," he said. "Attacking a corporate executive during an official meeting carries serious legal consequences." Isla went cold. She knew, even though her breathing was labored and her fists were still clenched. She was defeated. She had also suffered a significant loss. The last hit everyone in the room was tense, anticipating my next move. I inhaled deeply, regained my composure, and then reached into my folder to get the last set of papers. I declared, "As CEO and majority shareholder, I have made some executive decisions," in a cool, collected, and unquestionable tone. The room became silent. First, the transfer of my house to Isla? Blocked. Just uttering those words brought a rush of relief over me. Second, I have filed a legal injunction preventing any corporate property transfers without full board approval. I spoke sharply as I turned to face my father. "That means you can't just sign away assets to cover your mistakes anymore." He clenched his jaw. "You can't do this!" he yelled. I glared back at him. I responded, "Actually, I can, with ease. You made me the majority shareholder years ago, remember? It was your idea." There was a tight stillness. Some of the board members whispered to one another while shaking their heads. "I appreciate you explaining it, Dad, because right now, what had been happening behind closed doors was well known to all." The instant everything sank, in my dad's expression hardened. Tears filled my mother's eyes. "Is Isla too?" She was still as she stood there. It was done. No longer getting away with it. No more business credit cards. No more burning through millions while feigning to be the face of the brand. And I felt in charge for the first time in my life. My father made one final attempt to turn things around. "Iris," he added softly, "we don't have to involve the entire board. We can resolve this privately." I arched an eyebrow. "Oh, now you want privacy?" I looked around the board. "Who seconds the motion?" Silence fell for a beat. One hand then raised. Then another, and yet another, until the choice was obvious. I was victorious. They were aware of it. The repercussions first to go, my mother's face flushed with rage. My father trailed behind, his shoulders rigid, his authority over the business formally gone. Isla, though, her ideal world was falling apart around her as she stood there trembling. Her hate-filled eyes gave me one final glance. Whispering, "You ruined my life," she said. I cocked my head. "No, Isla," I muttered. "I just stopped you from ruining mine. After that, I left her, my parents, and the remains of their entitlement in my wake, permanently. I believed that my family would finally accept reality after Isla's corporate credit cards were cancelled. The board supported me, and the financial audit started. I ought to have been more aware. Do people like them? They refuse to accept repercussions. They engage in combat with them. They also attempt to negotiate their way out when fighting doesn't work. The direct repercussions. The news had spread by the following morning. All unauthorized personal accounts, including the lavish spending accounts that my parents and Isla had been using for years, had already been locked by the hotel board. After being hired, the financial audit team went through each transaction. Is Isla too? Officially, she was no longer the face of the brand. This meant she had nothing for the first time in her life. No incessant flow of business funds. No special benefits. No easy title that needed no work. Only a mountain of careless spending and a family that had lavished her with too much attention to teach her how to live without it. However, she chose to do what she normally did rather than confront the reality. She accused me. The disintegration. It began modestly. She shared a few pathetic, ambiguous photos on her Instagram story, including a black and white picture of herself with puffy, red eyes and cryptic phrases about betrayal with captions like, "Some wounds cut deeper than blood." And the traditional one, of course, "Family should always come first." The comments came flooding in. Unaware of the reality, her supporters hurried to her defense. "Who the hell injured you, Queen? Isla, you don't deserve this." Before the money, some people forget who supported them. I nearly laughed at the irony of that final one. Then, she did something that infuriated me. The campaign for public smears. A few days later, an article appeared on a blog dedicated to luxury living. I was accused by a source close to the Sutton family of betraying my sister, stealing the family business from them, and betraying my father. I gripped my coffee cup tighter as I read every deceptive, twisted untruth in that piece. Iris Sutton has assumed complete control of the family business, displacing her father, who established it from the foundation. Sources say the move was unexpected and left the Sutton family devastated. Meanwhile, her younger sister Isla, who was beloved as the public face of the brand, has been unfairly stripped of her role, despite the millions of loyal fans she brought to the company. Millions of devoted followers. She posted yacht selfies frequently and has 80,000 Instagram followers. That was mooching, not branding. The worst part, though? Not a word of it was denied by my parents. They allowed her to tarnish my name. That's when I realized. They weren't only angry that they couldn't control themselves, they were deliberately attempting to destroy me. The final attempt, a few days after the story's publication, my father called me. I didn't respond. My mother then made an attempt. Disregarded. Isla then sent me a straight text. "We need to talk. It doesn't have to be like this. Let's fix this before things get worse." That one? I put it on red. But my assistant appeared anxious when I entered my office that morning. She said in a whisper, "Your family is here." I didn't respond at all. I simply went into the conference room where they were waiting, squared my shoulders, and nodded. The three of them, with his arms crossed. My father appeared to be in control of the situation. My mom is already acting like a worried, frail mother. Isla was looking at me as if I had personally ruined her life. My father began, "We need to have a serious discussion," he said. I put my hands on the chair at the head of the table and spoke. "No, we don't." A look of amazement flashed across his face. "Iris," I interrupted, saying, "Stop, I know exactly why you're here." I looked at Isla. The fake sob story, the article, the attempt to turn the public against me. That was cute. Desperate, but cute. Her face flushed. As though she were a victim in all of this, my mother let out a loud sigh. "Iris, sweetheart, we're still family. We can't let business ruin that." It nearly made me chuckle. I said, funny, with a head tilt, "Because I don't recall you thinking about my family when you tried to steal my house." Quiet. My dad's mouth clenched. "You're making a mistake," he whispered quietly. "You're interrupting us in this manner. We can still fix this if you just—" "No." I straightened up, pushing my chair back. "You don't get to negotiate your way back into control. This isn't your company anymore. It's mine. You lost. Accept it." Isla finally lost her temper. She screamed, "You're being so cruel." She got up so quickly that her chair nearly fell over. "You're acting like we didn't raise you, like you don't owe us anything." My blood froze. "Owe you?" I said again. I shook my head and laughed sharply and without humor. I then gave her a direct look and stated, "I don't owe you anything." The room felt the weight of those statements, and my father appeared truly uncertain for the first time, leaving for good. I picked up my folder, walked to the door, and finished it without turning around. "This conversation is over. You're not welcome in my office again." My mum let out a gasp. I didn't care when my father began to speak. I left. I instructed security to lead them out of the structure. And I didn't turn around. The last collapse. The financial audit was completed in the weeks that followed. The missing money turned out to be far more problematic than we initially believed. Not $2 million. The amount involved was not $2 million, but rather $3 million. However, around $5 million in business cash had been embezzled, transferred into hidden accounts, and concealed under fictitious spending. My dad had no choice but to quit the company. The public exposed Isla for misrepresenting her position within the company. What about my mum? They continued to accuse me of destroying the family. But me? In my life, for the first time, I had freedom. I believed that once I left that conference room, they would realize that their control over the business and over me was finished. I believed that cutting them off would be the end of it. I was mistaken. Because they're liked by people, they never give up. And they turn dangerous after realizing they've lost everything. The final second plan, Liam, brought me into his office a week after I had formally fired my father from the company, his countenance blank. His words, "We have a problem." I took a seat and began to prepare myself. "Your parents and Isla have been reaching out to investors privately. They're trying to buy up shares in the company." I blinked. What? They're looking for a way back in. If they get enough shareholders on their side, they could challenge your authority as CEO and try to force a buyout. Incredibly so. Even licking their wounds was not something they were pretending to do. Already they were planning how to get back in. I inquired, "How much do they have?" Liam grinned. "Almost nothing. They've burned through most of their money, but they're promising ridiculous returns to anyone who invests in them." My mouth twisted. Let them try. I didn't feel afraid, since I had knowledge that they did not. The money pit they didn't see coming, the final audit, was finished 3 days later. Is the money missing? Even worse than we anticipated. $5, $6 million in misappropriated money. And you know what? A sizable amount of it had been transferred under my father's name through fictitious company costs, which meant he was held accountable on a personal level. What's the best part? He had secured some corporate loans with his personal assets as security when he started up the company years ago, including their home. The unexpected meeting. I arranged a private meeting at a neutral legal firm the same evening. I wasn't alone by myself. Liam was present. Our corporate counsel was as well. So were Isla and my parents. They were arrogant when they entered. Isla likely believed that wearing large designer sunglasses made her appear scary. My mom was acting like she was the victim here, exhausted and frustrated. What about my dad? Quiet, not anxious. Not quite yet. That would soon alter. I slid a folder across the table. "This is the final audit report," I stated in a composed, businesslike tone. My dad opened it. He skimmed the initial pages. Then he became pale. Liam bent over. "It's all there. The evidence of financial mismanagement, missing funds, and personal accounts is abundant. Enough evidence to warrant a full-scale legal investigation." My mom took a sharp breath and held it. "You wouldn't," she said in a low voice. I looked her in the eye. "I don't have to." I looked at my dad. "The board will see this. The investors will see this. The authorities will see this. And when they do, they'll find out exactly how deep this fraud goes." Quiet. I then revealed the last surprise. "Oh, and by the way," I replied nonchalantly, "because you used your personal assets as collateral for those company loans, guess what's on the line?" They lowered their faces. "The house," Liam concluded on my behalf. Isla appeared truly frightened for the first time since they entered. My mum said, "You can't take the house." I cocked my head. "I'm not taking anything." "The bank will." The hands of my father clenched into fists. At last, he had figured it out. There was no easy way out. Don't try to win over the investors. They can't buy their way back to power. They had been stealing as much as they could from the business for years, and now it was they who were getting disconnected. "The last decision, so," I remarked, reclining in my chair. "You have 2 options. Option 1, you fight me. You challenge the audit, drag this into legal battles, and try to convince the board to reinstate you. Maybe you win back a fraction of what you lost, but in the process, The fraud charges stack up, and you lose everything else. Quiet. Option 2. You sign a legal agreement forfeiting all company shares, publicly admitting to financial mismanagement, and in return, I keep this internal. No lawsuits. There will be no criminal charges. And you get to keep whatever personal savings you haven't burned through yet. I feared my father's teeth could break from the way he tightened his jaw. He snarled. You want me to sign away everything? I gave a shrug. I mean, you already stole everything. I'm just making it official. He was breathing heavily, as if he were holding himself back. Then Isla did a really pitiful thing. With a whisper, she turned to face my mother and said, Mummy, do something. Mom, 25 years old. I am attending a legal meeting for the company. It nearly made me chuckle. However, my mum, she was at a loss for words for the first time, since she at last comprehended. They were defeated, signing off on their authority. My father pulled the pen from the table and signed after 10 whole minutes of stillness. Just one signature. And like that, he had left. With tears welling up in her eyes, my mother trailed after, but remained silent. Is Isla too? She paused. I gazed at her, utterly uninterested. Either you sign, or I let the board investigate. You won't just lose your access to company money, Isla. In this industry, you will face blacklisting. She grasped the pen with trembling hands. She put her signature on it. That was the end of it. I shut the folder, got to my feet, and left without saying anything else. I didn't bid them farewell, for this was not a farewell. They had decided on this conclusion for themselves, their current location. The consequences hit them hard 3 months later. Someone stole my parents' mansion. Isla lost her platform, her money, and her prestige. She attempted to start her own brand, but she had no idea how to manage a business without free funding. And me? Without them, I reconstructed the business. No more corporate avarice. No more egotistical family members taking advantage of years of toil. Just me, managing a business I battled for. I also didn't feel like I owed anyone anything for the first time. I was free for the first time in my life. No more phoning late at night to discuss family sacrifices. No more taking the blame for their careless spending. I no longer feel the need to prove myself to my own dang family. I was the only one managing a business I had saved on my own terms. What's the best part? There was nothing they could do about it. Where they found their way. My parents lost everything once they signed away their shares. The bank took their mansion and sold it to pay off the debts they had ignored for years. Far from the opulent lifestyle they were accustomed to, they were forced to downgrade to an apartment. In business circles, news quickly spread that no one trusts a man who led his own company to ruin, despite my father's best efforts to restore his name. What about Isla? She rushed to social media, like she often did. She attempted to fabricate a story to paint herself as the victim for months. My own sister deceived me. She robbed me of everything. Families should encourage one another, not undermine one another. However, she couldn't afford the opulent lifestyle that made her renowned if she didn't have access to the corporate funds. Her audience became disinterested. Are there any brand deals available? Lost. Free vacations? Over. The glitzy existence she had established using funds from others was destroyed beyond recognition. Destroyed beyond recognition. She attempted to start her own brand, Isla Sutton Lifestyle, which was a basic influencer cliché, but she had no understanding of how to manage a business. It failed within 6 months. She switched from private aircraft to low-cost carriers. From fast fashion to designer labels, the golden child went to nothing, and she was solely responsible for her own actions. My current location, I needed some time to completely recover from the betrayal of my family. The old familiar shame still crept in, even after I had triumphed and they had nothing more to take. Did I go too far? Was I really the bad guy? Should I have tried harder to fix things? Then I recalled all the times I gave up something for them, the years of labor, the evenings when you couldn't sleep, the way they squandered my money and made fun of me. Nothing was taken from them by me. I simply stopped allowing people to take advantage of me. And everything changed after I came to terms with that. I reorganized the business and made it stronger than it had ever been. Now that Isla and my father were gone, the business was turning a profit. For the first time, the funds were reinvested in the company rather than spent on luxury vacations and shopping. And me? I purchased a new home that was exclusively mine, free of any connections to them or unpleasant memories. I traveled because I could at last, not for work or to close deals, and above all, I created a life in which no one could ever rule me again. The last word, I received one final email a year after everything had settled down. It's not from my dad. It's not from my mom. Not even from Isla. The number that sent it was blocked. Subject, I hope all is well with you. Iris, I don't know if you'll ever forgive us, but I hope one day you do. We made mistakes, but we're still family, and family should always find a way back to each other. I spent a lot of time looking at the message. I then removed it. No answer, no rage, no last remarks, nothing but quiet, because not everyone is worthy of a second opportunity. Additionally, I didn't feel pressured to offer them one for the first time in my life. Going ahead, I didn't really discover who I was until I lost my family. Indeed, it wasn't simple. However, I discovered something while traveling. Blood is not what defines a family. It all depends on who shows up for you, who honors you. There are some that simply take and take and take and take. And I was finally someone I was proud of, once I gave up trying to win their approval and be the good daughter. Since the reality is, they were never necessary to me. I was required by them. And now, they would need to adjust to my absence.